The slap landed before I had time to react. My glasses flew across the polished ballroom floor, shattering under the weight of silence. 130 guests froze in place, their laughter cut off like a record needle lifted mid-song. My cheek stung, but the pain in my chest cut deeper. Standing before me, her wedding gown flawless under the chandeliers, Sloane Carter glared. "That's what you get for being so selfish," she hissed. "A woman your age doesn't need so much space." My apartment keys, the only thing she wanted, dangled between us like bait. Not a single voice rose in my defense. Some guests whispered, others turned their faces away, embarrassed to watch. My son Noah lowered his eyes, frozen in shame or cowardice, I couldn't tell which. I crouched to gather my broken glasses, hands trembling, tears stinging. Yet beneath the humiliation, something steadier stirred inside me. This slap was not just an insult. It was the end of pretending. My name is Clara Whitman. I am 68 years old, and tonight my silence ended. Most people saw me as a widow living on a modest pension, a woman who drove an old sedan and wore thrift store sweaters. I worked 3 days a week at Bay Street Florals, arranging roses and lilies for customers who rarely knew my name. To Sloane, I was an outdated burden, a fragile woman clinging to independence she didn't deserve. But appearances are deceiving. My husband Daniel, who passed 10 years ago, had never been the ordinary office worker people thought he was. Together we had built a small import business that quietly grew into something far greater. Investments in a downtown office building, steady index funds, and even a weathered coastal property turned rental, all of it carefully hidden behind the curtain of simplicity. We made a pact early in our marriage. Visible wealth attracts noise. Invisible wealth buys freedom. We chose the second path. I drove an old car because it ran well. I wore simple clothes because I valued comfort. And I kept working at the flower shop because I loved it, not because I needed to. No one in that ballroom, least of all Sloane, understood that the woman they thought powerless had resources, choices, and strength they could not imagine. I still remember the first evening Noah brought Sloane to meet me. Her smile was bright, but her eyes wandered. She barely noticed the meal I had prepared. Instead, she studied the apartment like a real estate agent on a mission. Her gaze lingered on the size of the living room, the balcony view over the harbor, the security system near the door. She called the space cozy, though her tone suggested the opposite. From that night forward, Sloane's words always carried hidden barbs. "Clara, senior communities have emergency cords in every room. It would be so much safer for you." Or, "Noah, your mom deserves a smaller place, don't you think?" Each comment sounded polite, but the message was sharp. She wanted my home. One afternoon she arrived with a glossy stack of brochures for retirement facilities. She spread them across my coffee table like a poker hand. The pages were highlighted, circles around costs and amenities. "Just options," she insisted with a practiced smile. I nodded, but inside I filed it away. This was no accident, it was strategy. I changed the subject to weather and gardening, and I noticed something. Her lips tightened, just for a moment, when she realized she hadn't steered the conversation. That flicker told me everything. Sloane wasn't just a daughter-in-law trying to help. She was a woman mapping out her next possession, and I was standing in the way. 2 weeks before the wedding, Sloane came to my apartment with an entourage. She did not arrive alone. Her parents, Grant and Marissa, followed behind her, and Noah trailed quietly at the end. I felt the trap before they even sat down. They chose my living room like it was a conference table. Marissa crossed her legs, smoothing her designer skirt, while Grant glanced around with the eyes of a man sizing up property. Sloane cleared her throat. "Clara, we wanted to talk about your future," she began, her tone syrupy sweet. My stomach tightened. Grant leaned forward. "At your age, living alone in such a large space is unnecessary and frankly unsafe. What if you fell and no one knew?" His words were too rehearsed, polished as if they had practiced them in the car. Noah finally spoke, his voice small. "Mom, they're right. Maybe it's time to think about moving somewhere more appropriate." The words landed heavier than any slap. Appropriate for my age. Decided by whom? Then Marissa delivered the heart of their plan. "If you sell this apartment, you could cover the cost of a lovely senior residence and still have funds left to help Noah and Sloane start their marriage strong." It was theater, and every actor knew their lines. But I asked one question they hadn't rehearsed for. So the apartment would be perfect for them, wouldn't it? Silence filled the room, thick and awkward. Their eyes told me the answer. When they left, I sat alone in the quiet and let the tears come. They thought they had cornered me, but they had only lit the fuse. That night, I made a call I had hoped I would never need to make. Amaya Rhodes, an old friend who had worked in real estate for decades, still picked up the phone on the second ring. "Amaya, I need you to find out everything you can about Noah and Sloane's finances," I whispered, my voice shaking. She didn't ask why, she only promised to get back to me. A week later, the truth landed like ice water. Their wedding wasn't funded by savings or generosity from the Carter family. It was stacked on credit cards and personal loans. Their apartment rent was months behind. Both luxury cars parked in their driveway were financed beyond reason. Sloane's consulting work brought in pennies, yet her expenses screamed of excess. And worse, Amaya discovered inquiries Noah himself had made asking banks how to leverage my apartment for loans, even researching power of attorney procedures for seniors. The final detail twisted the knife. A private investigator overheard Sloane on the phone bragging to a friend. "Once we move her out, we'll be set. She'll probably even thank us for helping." That night, I pulled out a brown folder from my desk and labeled it with a single word: winter. Because for Noah and Sloane, the season of easy living was about to end. The night before the wedding, I sat alone at my kitchen table. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. In front of me lay Daniel's old leather notebook, the one where he wrote small reminders and thoughts. On the first page, in his neat handwriting, were 5 words: "Strength doesn't shout, it stands." I read that line again and again, until it sank into my bones. I realized I had been shouting silently for months, through tears, through exhaustion, through prayers. But now it was time to stand. I picked up the phone and called Victor Hale, the attorney who had handled our family business for years. "Victor," I said, my voice steady for the first time in months, "prepare the documents. Freeze the transfers. Cancel the guarantees. Amend the will. Tomorrow may be ugly, but it will be honest." He paused only a moment before answering, "Understood." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept deeply. The decision had been made. The ballroom at Elmwood Hall glowed with chandeliers and music when the blow finally came. One sharp slap across my cheek, the sting of glass shattering on marble, and a hush so heavy it pressed against my skin. Sloane stood tall in her wedding gown, venom dripping from her words. "Give me the keys, Clara. That apartment will serve us better than you." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but no one moved. Noah, my son, lowered his eyes, his hands buried in his pockets as though hiding from the truth. I gathered the broken pieces of my glasses, each shard cutting more than the last, and rose with trembling dignity. Without another word, I turned and walked out beneath the chandeliers. In the parking lot, the cool night air steadied me. My fingers found my phone inside my worn purse. "Victor," I said when he answered, "Elmwood Hall. 30 minutes. Bring everything." Before I ended the call, I asked one more favor. I dialed Mr. Thomas Ridley, my neighbor of 20 years. "Thomas, can you fetch the brown folder from my desk? The one marked winter. Bring it to me here." He didn't ask questions. He simply said, "On my way." The stage had been set. Their celebration would soon become a reckoning. I sat in my car beneath the yellow glow of the streetlights, the chill of the leather seat pressing against my back. My hands trembled, but not from fear this time, it was resolve. 20 minutes later, headlights swept across the lot. Victor Hale stepped out, a slim briefcase tucked under his arm, his tie slightly loosened from the rush. "Clara," he said softly, "are you certain? Once we take this step, there's no turning back." I opened the brown folder Thomas had just delivered and placed it on the hood of my car. Inside lay years of records, bank transfers, property deeds, investment statements. Proof of the life Daniel and I had built quietly. Proof of how much I had already done for Noah without his knowledge. I signed document after document under Victor's watchful eye. An order halting every monthly transfer into Noah's accounts. A cancellation of the lease guarantee I had been secretly covering. A formal amendment to my will, redirecting inheritance toward the Whitman Fund for Senior Dignity. When I finished, Victor gathered the papers. I looked him in the eye. "Ring the bell, Victor. It's time." My voice did not shake. The ballroom doors opened and every head turned. The music faltered, then stopped. Victor walked beside me, his briefcase in hand, his voice calm but commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I apologize for the interruption, but there are urgent matters concerning Mr. Noah Whitman and Mrs. Sloane Carter." A hush fell so deep I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Sloane stiffened, her hands clutching her bouquet. "Clara," she spat, "what are you doing back here? You've caused enough drama tonight." But the edge in her voice betrayed nerves. Victor opened the folder and removed the first document. Effective immediately, the financial guarantee Mrs. Whitman provided for Noah's lease has been revoked. The landlord will be notified tomorrow morning. 30 days to vacate or secure a new guarantor. Noah's face drained of color. Financial guarantee? He whispered, glancing at me with dawning horror. Victor's tone remained steady. Also terminated are the monthly transfers, $4,500 a month for rent, car insurance, and credit cards. Those funds came directly from your mother's accounts. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Guests exchanged looks of shock as Sloane's lips parted in disbelief. That's a lie, she shrieked. Look at her, she works in a flower shop. She drives a 10-year-old car. She doesn't have money. Murmurs grew louder, cell phones lifted to record. Victor raised one last paper, and finally the financial guarantee for this very celebration has been cancelled. The ballroom retains the right to demand payment before the event continues. The silence shattered into chaos. Guests whispered, some edging toward the exits, uncertain whether the party would even continue. The manager of Elmwood Hall appeared near the stage, his jaw tight. I stepped forward, my voice steady. Noah, who brought an appraiser to my building without telling me? Who asked banks about loans against my home? Who stood silent when your wife slapped me? He had no words. His shoulders sagged, his eyes wet. Victor closed the folder with a snap. Miss Whitman has also amended her will. Assets once promised to her son will now support organizations that protect seniors from family exploitation. Sloane's scream cut through the ballroom, wild and raw. You can't do this for your family. I met her gaze without blinking. Family is not built on greed. Kindness is not consent. Tonight you learned the difference. The ballroom erupted into a storm of whispers and shifting chairs. Some guests slipped quietly toward the exits, unwilling to be part of a scandal. Others lingered, their eyes locked on Noah and Sloane as if watching a stage play unravel. The manager stood with folded arms near the stage, waiting for someone to take responsibility for the bill. I turned from the chaos, the weight of silence replaced by a strange calm. Outside, the night air wrapped around me like a shield. Thomas Ridley caught up to me by the doors and placed a warm hand on my shoulder. You did what needed to be done, Clara, he said firmly. Don't doubt it for a second. Over the next 3 days, the calls and messages came in waves. Noah's voicemail shifted from anger to pleading, 37 in total. Sloane's texts arrived at odd hours, dripping with panic and blame. Twice, her parents showed up at my door, demanding that I undo the damage. But each time, I simply repeated the same words, my decision stands. For once, the strength in my voice belonged wholly to me. I should have expected that Sloane would not surrender quietly. Within a week, whispers began circling in the neighborhood. She told anyone who would listen that I was unstable, that the scene at the wedding proved I had lost my grip on reality. According to her, I was an old woman lashing out at a young couple's happiness. Then came the notice from Victor. Noah had filed a preliminary petition in court, questioning my competency to manage my own affairs. Attached were sworn statements from a handful of wedding guests, people Sloane had convinced with selective retellings. They described me as irrational, vengeful, emotionally volatile. Reading those words was like swallowing glass. But the tide turned in an unexpected way. Several guests had recorded the wedding confrontation on their phones. Clips spread quickly online. The world didn't see a confused old widow. They saw a woman holding her ground with dignity while exposing years of manipulation. Comments poured in, stories from strangers who had endured similar abuse, praise for boundaries I had set. The very act meant to discredit me had placed a spotlight on the truth. Sloane's campaign had given me something she never intended, a public voice. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse with Victor by my side. My palms were damp, but my steps were steady. Across the aisle, Sloane clutched Noah's arm, her face painted in calm determination, though her eyes betrayed fear. She believed her petition would paint me as erratic. She underestimated the weight of evidence. Victor presented documents showing months of bank transfers from my accounts to Noah's. He displayed records of Sloane bringing an appraiser to my apartment, emails inquiring about loans against my property, and notes from the investigator who overheard her phone call. Piece by piece, their plan unraveled under the fluorescent lights. The judge dismissed their petition as frivolous, ordering them to pay my attorney fees. The blow was financial, but the humiliation was far worse. Soon after, a producer from Cityline Stories contacted Victor. Your client's case resonates, she said. People need to hear it. 2 weeks later, I sat beneath the studio lights across from host Nora Patel. She didn't ask for gossip. She asked about patterns of control, about how emotional abuse begins quietly. I leaned toward the camera and said, "Boundaries protect love from turning into leverage." That line would follow me everywhere. 2 years have passed since that night at Elmwood Hall, and my life is unrecognizable. The Whitman Fund for Senior Dignity, created from the inheritance I once set aside for Noah, now supports free legal clinics and counseling for older adults facing family exploitation. Mr. Ridley, my neighbor, serves as volunteer coordinator, and Amaya Rhodes leads workshops called Know Your Deed, teaching seniors how to protect their homes. My days are fuller than ever. I tend the community garden behind our building, teaching neighbors how to grow herbs and vegetables. I spend mornings at the foundation offices, afternoons meeting with families who need guidance. My health has improved, my sleep is peaceful, and for the first time in years, I feel younger than my age. Noah reached out 3 times in these 2 years. Each time his request was for money, never for forgiveness. I answered none of them. Instead, I created a trust fund for his son, my grandson Owen. When he turns 18, he will receive it directly, free from the weight of his parents' mistakes. That is my gift to him, a chance to start clean. Looking back, I realized the story was never just about me. It was about what can happen when love is mistaken for entitlement, when kindness is confused with weakness. The lessons I carry now are simple, but they were earned with pain. First, document patterns, not just blow-ups. My winter folder told the story no one could deny. Second, separate help from enablement. By secretly covering Noah's bills, I kept him from facing reality until it was too late. Third, use professionals early. Victor and Amaya shifted the balance from isolation to strategy. Fourth, public composure is power. In that ballroom, Sloane screamed. I stayed calm. The world noticed. And finally, boundaries can be love. My grandson's trust is proof. I cut off his parents, but I left a path for him. These lessons are not theories, they are lived truths. They remind me every day that dignity is not a luxury. It is the foundation for every relationship worth keeping. If this story echoed something in your own life, remember you are not alone. Share it with someone who needs courage today. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read them all. And if you want more stories of quiet strength and lessons hard-earned, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these voices alive.